Good afternoon. How are you today? October, as you know, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the U.S. And here on Marketers on a Mission, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Week. My guest today, Judy Pearson, will tell us about her book, It's Just Hair, and the nonprofit she started to serve other cancer survivors. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews by and for Christian writers, speakers, and artists. This is episode number 144. It's Just Hair with guest author Judy Pearson. Hello, Judy. How are you today?
Hey, Patricia. I'm great. Thank you.
It's so wonderful to have you. Really appreciate you taking the time. And you have such an interesting story, both before, during, and after cancer. So it's just, I'm really revved up to hear what the Lord has to say to us today.
Awesome. And I'm impressed you've done 144 of these things. That's impressive.
Thank you. Let's go to a day in the life before cancer darkened your door. You were recently married, and you had your eldest son was facing an important trip. Tell us about those days, please.
That's very true. I had found and married the love of my life. My boys had grown into fine men, although the eldest, who's a career Air Force intelligence agent, was being sent to Afghanistan for a 6-month deployment. And not that Afghanistan is a garden spot now, but it was really heated up at that point in time. So obviously, there was a lot on my emotional plate, both good and bad. That same son had a 6-month-old. So, of course, we were celebrating his birth along with the delicious life of his older sister. And I was a writer and a speaker and working on a book.
And your books are fantastic. I haven't had the opportunity to read them, but I have seen them and seen excerpts of them, and I have a lot to say. I don't know if we want to get to it. I'm very tantalized by them. Now, in 2011, tell us about the diagnosis day. Did you get a phone call like several other guests did? Was it a regular doctor's appointment? How was it revealed to you?
So it was this really strange thing, and I'm going to tell you the 2 days before the diagnosis.
Okay.
My son and his family, the Air Force son, they were living in England. So my daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren had come for a visit. And in the midst of all of that, I had found a lump 2 months after a clean mammogram. And so in the midst of all of that, we went through the diagnostic trail up to a biopsy. And I got to the biopsy appointment, and I was laying there, and I was just blah, 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 blah with the radiologist. And she said, "Listen to me. This is very serious." And I went back out into the waiting room. My husband and granddaughter were waiting, and I said, "Wow, this is serious." So we kind of talked about it a little bit, and when we got home, talked about it with my daughter-in-law. But, I'm in the bad things don't happen to good people club, and so I figured it was all going to be okay. So the day the phone call came, 2 days later, my daughter-in-law and I were planning to go to the grocery store. I looked at the phone and said, "Oh, this is the doctor." And she said, "You have an extremely aggressive form of breast cancer, triple negative breast cancer. It's going to take a lot of treatment. It's going to be grueling, and you have to get after it right now."
Wow.
And it wasn't so much the "you have cancer" part. It was aggressive and serious. And I hung up the phone and looked at my daughter-in-law and told her my husband had gone out on an errand, and she said, "What should we do?" And I said, "Go to the grocery store." So that's what we did. But I can tell you, I was scared to death.
Now, this is not the first challenge that you have faced, is it?
I'm sorry?
This was not the first challenge. It's the first time you've had breast cancer. But this was not the first challenge of your life, is it? Has it?
Absolutely not. My darling biological mother died at 66 of a lung disease, not cancer, but a lung disease. My daddy married a longtime family friend 2 years later. We were thrilled. My step-siblings and I had grown up together as neighbors, so we were thrilled. She was diagnosed with colon cancer before she married my dad, with a very horrific form of oral cancer after she married him. He had heart attacks in between her cancer and after. He died of a pulmonary embolism, and she died of a third primary cancer, and all of that was in the span of 5 years. And I had so relied on, I had a wonderful relationship with my parents and with my stepmom, and had relied on them, figuring, they were making me a better person, so I didn't need to really think things through on my own. So left alone, and after 2 divorces, I don't give up easily. I was married for 15 years twice. So after all of that, I thought my life was finally on track. And then this.
And what time frame between all of those sicknesses and death and your diagnosis?
My stepmom died. This is the ironic part. My stepmother died a year before my diagnosis. And I channeled her energy and my mother's energy, and I suppose my dad's too, but I went to my mom's, all the things I had learned from them about going through illness, being a patient, being your own advocate, having someone else along to take notes, all of those kinds of things. They were the greatest teachers even after they'd left us, but certainly were looking down on me, I think.
My goodness. You said that you believe in 2 things unwaveringly. What are those 2 things?
First of all, I think that, and actually I have to just stop here for a second and say, I have the most wonderful in-laws. 2 people of great faith who have completely just taken me in as one of their own, in addition to being a daughter-in-law. And my mother-in-law said it best when we called them and said that I had cancer. She said, "This was decided for you before you were born. The Lord knows that you will be strong through this. We pray that you will recover, but we know that you will be taken care of, whichever way this goes."
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the belief that I had, is that no matter how challenged we are, that's something there, it's been predetermined, and that something in there is going to give us or allow us to be a teacher, to inspire, to help another person or a group. And then the second thing is that while we're on the earth, while we walk among one another, we need to pay back to humanity and to society. We didn't get here in a vacuum, and hopefully the world will go on until he comes back to take us all to glory. But until then, we need to take care of one another. And so those are the 2 things. There's treasure in every wreckage, and we all owe a payback to society.
Okay, I love all of that you just said. That was very appropriate and simply put, but very deep meanings. Good.
Thank you.
You write that you were not, and are not a victim of cancer. This is going back and touching on what you just mentioned, but that you were chosen for cancer. Now, when I hear that and it sinks down into my soul, and I've never experienced this issue, I've had my own like everybody else has. How does that change you on the inside? What kind of responsibilities do you sense as a result of knowing that truth and embracing that you might not otherwise have?
And I guess maybe this is a good point in time too, just to kind of give the definition of being a cancer survivor. A person becomes a survivor at the moment of diagnosis, because that's when you start surviving cancer. So from diagnosis through the end of your life, whether it's from cancer or from any other cause, you are a survivor. There's no magical, you have to wait 3 years to get the gold star.
Great point.
But that's an important thing to know. So I'm going to tell you a little story to sort of answer your question. We formed a Bible study in January of this year. 5 women I knew none of them. I had met one just briefly, and that's how she reached out to me. But 5 women, all survivors. And all of us at that point in time were breast cancer survivors. And I can't begin to tell you how going through Bible studies, we're now on our 3rd, Beth Moore's Book of Daniel, which is amazing. I can't tell you what colors the Bible takes after you've gone through cancer. I mean, all of a sudden you're like, well, Lord, you're speaking right to me. I can tell. It's just the coolest thing ever. So when we started, about the 2nd week, I think, or the 3rd week, we were doing the I am statements. I think it's just called I am, I guess, Beth Turkhurst. And one of the gals looked at all of us and said, I really think we were chosen to have cancer because the Lord knew that for however long we have, we are going to be able to impact others' lives because of our faith and because of the fact that our faith carried us through our cancer. And I looked at her and I said, I'm bringing you my book next week. Because I really do think, as do you and probably a lot of people watching, that that God chooses us for particular paths. Like my mother-in-law said, this was decided for you. And that others, for better or worse, learn from our challenges to better prepare them for theirs, I think.
Yes, true.
But isn't that amazing? Talk about God working in mysterious ways.
Yes, because I can see that somebody saying that 20 years out or 40 years out, but to be able to see that and embrace it and accept it as the responsibility that it is, in addition to the responsibilities of being a patient.
That's right. And she actually, I think she was just finishing treatment at that time. So she wasn't even completely out yet.
That's a wise woman right there.
Yes, it is.
Good for her and good for those who know her and love her.
Yeah, we're very blessed, to be sure.
You said that you found silver linings, that when it came time for the hair question, you found silver linings as a bald woman. Tell us about those, please.
Oh, well, so the funny, crazy part of it is, again, because our son was living in England, I had promised him before the diagnosis that he was going to be gone over the holidays, that my husband and I would fly to England and spend the month of December, the holidays, with them. And little did I know that 2 days after chemo, that meant 2 days after chemo, I was getting on a plane to fly. But it's an amazingly powerful thing to stand at the front of a giant jet as a bald woman, because everyone stares at you and wonders whether you're making some kind of Demi Moore G.I. Jane statement, or you're sick, or you're just plain nuts. It was so fun. I loved the reaction. But more than that, and I did buy a wig, and I wore it 3 times, and it felt like a dead cat on my head. I hated it. I donated it. And in the winter, because we lived in Chicago, I wore a hat. But other than that, I just went bald. But the really neat part about that was it was a conversation starter. And no matter where I was, even what country I was in, people, men and women, would come up to me and say either, I've been where you are, don't give up. And I'd look at him and say, oh, I haven't given up at all. Mm-hmm. Or someone who hadn't been a survivor would come up to me and say her mother, her sister, her friend was going through cancer. And I'd take her hand and say, look at this. This is the face of a survivor. You give her that power and you share that with everybody. Because I think that, it doesn't matter that heart disease kills more people and more women than all cancers combined. It doesn't matter. Cancer is the most terrifying diagnosis that we hear, because it's so, because for so long it was unsurvivable. And then the other silver lining was the amount of time you save not having to do your hair, the amount of money. Oh my gosh, I used to be blonde. Now I'm still blonde, but I get help. Holy cow. I figured it out. It's in the book. I can't remember how many thousands of dollars I saved. And then when it came back, I always had sort of a bob. It looked like a football helmet. And when it came back, I'd never had short hair before, and I never had curly hair. And now I have curly short hair, and I love it. I don't have to do it every day. I wake up, I spritz it with water, and I'm done.
It's very becoming.
Thank you.
Short hair is not becoming on everyone, but it is very becoming on you.
Thank you. Thanks.
You talk in the book about having a top 10 list, and someone who had several dark days or dark years suggested it to you, and you acknowledged that it has some cheesiness to it, and yet it had a profound impact on you when you did it. Tell us about that, please.
The top 10 list, now you're going to have to remind me. I still have chemo brain, and I've slept since then. So what did I talk about?
You were just talking about things to be grateful for, and that when you did it, you were like, I'm not sure, but then you did it, and it was really had a surprising effect.
That's true. And with our organization, we do workshops to help guide women to consider what their passions and their experiences and their cancer have uniquely or might have uniquely qualified them to do in a second act. And one of the things we do is make a blessings list. And I say to them, this is non-denominational. You don't even have to be a believer. But it is, it's a psychologically proven psychological fact that looking at a list of things for which you are grateful make you feel better, because everybody has something to be grateful for, even if it's just really glad my house didn't burn down last night. So for me, the top ones are always the love of the Lord, my amazing husband and children and friends. And then as a woman slowly, very begrudgingly getting older, when I look at myself, and cancer taught me this as well, I was always a woman who liked to look nice. Most of us do, like to do my hair, like to foo-foo up. And cancer, of course, makes you very humble and all of that, because it's really hard to look really spiffy when you're bald and gaunt and all those other kinds of things. But the fact of the matter is, God saw fit for me to survive until this point. I am not going to waste my time complaining about aging. I'd much rather have that than the alternative. But more importantly, when I look at crow's feet and laugh lines, it's because I've laughed. When I have a little muffin top, it's because I'm well fed. And when I wake up with this crazy Elvis hair in the morning, I'm just thrilled I've got hair at all. And so I have serious and then some comical blessings that I still think about and look back on and meditate on each morning in my quiet time.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Let me check Facebook and see if we have any comments or questions. If you're just joining us, we are still in Breast Cancer Awareness Week, and we are learning from breast cancer survivors. And it is a deeply moving and very informative and periodically laughter-filled week for us. Because that's life, isn't it? It's horrible and it's wonderful. It's horrible and it's wonderful. Somewhere in between.
Helen Keller said that we could never learn joy if there wasn't darkness in the world.
Yes.
And that's true. And I used to say to my mom, as she was going through her disease, and she'd get really discouraged, and I'd say, Mom, it's only when it's the darkest you can best see the stars, so let's find a star for today.
Nice. And if you don't have a relationship with a person to say that, then it's sort of sloughs off. But when you have a relationship, it really hits home, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah. That's true.
Now, you published It's Only Hair, excuse me, It's Just Hair, 20 Essential Life Lessons. And I noticed, we're going to talk about that for just a moment, but I noticed that it said volume 1. So there are other volumes coming, is that right?
Well, at the time that it was published, that was sort of my thought. I had stopped I'm a nonfiction writer, a biographer, a storyteller of other people's stories. And after cancer, I had a really hard time going back to the project I had been working on. So, but I had continued writing magazine articles and my own blog and for online publications. So all of those were put into It's Just Hair with the idea that, yes, that would, morph or give birth to other books. But God had different plans for me. So it's probably volume 1 and the last volume of that.
Okay. All right. I was wondering if there was a tie into that and what's going on with in written form with second act. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So I'm noticing that you were diagnosed in 2011 and It's Just Hair was published in 2012.
Right.
That's a lot of activity. You're writing a book while you're at the hospital and at the appointments. You mentioned that there were two yous. There was a cancer you or patient you and a watcher you. Tell us about that.
That's right. Well, everyone has their own cancer story, and we go through the feelings and the reactions and the emotions and certainly the fear and you can have very strong faith but still be really, really terrified.
Yes.
And then there were times, and I've had other survivors tell me this, there were times that I would sort of step back and say, okay, so if this was my best friend, if this was my mother, how would we do this? What would this look like? And then I try to blend those two together. I've always been a strong personality. In fact, my son just said to my 17-year-old granddaughter, she said, Gigi would never ground me. I'm Gigi. Gigi would never ground me. Gigi's cool. And my son said, Gigi's very cool as a grandmother, but as a mother, she was a force to be reckoned with. I've always had this really, I am woman, hear me roar kind of a personality. And all of a sudden, I'm taken over by fear and I was never angry. I was just disappointed. I didn't want this to be the end. I didn't feel like I'd left. I didn't feel like I'd done enough, like I needed to do more somehow. And and needed to be strong for my darling husband who felt so helpless. And incidentally, I told him after the diagnosis, you should leave. Let's get this annulled or whatever we need to do as Christians because I'm going to die, and if I don't die, I'm certainly going to be breastless, and this is not what you signed up for. And he said, this is exactly what I signed up for. Oh. And that man was a rock, but I worried about him. My son was in Afghanistan getting shot at. My grandchildren and daughter-in-law were all by themselves in England. I needed to be strong for everybody else. So in order to be able to do that, I kind of married the I'm terrified Judy and the let's look this over, Judy.
How did it help you to observe your own experience? Did it help you to process it because you were observing it versus just experiencing it?
I think it might have. Patricia, it's a funny thing. I have a much greater chance of getting cancer again than you do, because you've never been diagnosed. Whether it's another primary, whether it's some kind of metastasis from, right now I have no evidence of disease. In the popular vernacular, that would be I'm cancer-free. But we don't know enough about the disease in general or the individual components to know why, but secondary diagnoses and metastases happen regardless. And I kind of now am at the point, especially having met and talked to so many women survivors, I kind of feel like a second diagnosis, and I've talked to some women who've been diagnosed a second and third time, it's you just sort of go into, okay, we know how to do this. We've walked this walk before. We know what's important. Mm-hmm. So I guess now I feel more confident having been an outsider looking in at other people's diseases. Mm-hmm. But certainly at that time, it was helpful as well.
Mm. Well, excuse me, after your treatment, you had an idea. How did a second act, now we're going to talk about that at length, but how did that come about? What was the nucleus? What was the impetus for that?
So I came across some research I was doing for the book I was working on before cancer, which was not a person's story, and that's my forte and my love, so why I deviated, I don't know. But anyway, it was a book about women's courage, why it's important for us to recognize the difference between men's courage and our own, and taking a look at ordinary women who'd been extraordinarily courageous in many ways. So to do that, I looked up volunteering and volunteering research because there were some women who'd undertaken some very dangerous volunteer positions in dangerous parts of the world, and spoke with the preeminent volunteer researcher in the country. And then there was going to be a chapter about courage in the face of chronic or serious illness. And I interviewed a woman who was a stage 4 ovarian survivor, which means she was probably never going to be completely rid of her cancer. And she had created a support group at her hospital for other stage 4 ovarian survivors. She was writing a newsletter, and my pre-cancer self thought, what is this woman doing? She's dying. Why isn't she like going to Europe or something? Mm-hmm. My post-cancer self thought, wow, giving back made her stronger. Mm. And then I was reading a totally unrelated magazine that had a column, it's not even in publication anymore, it had a column called Second, with the second word second spelled out, Second Acts. And these were stories about women, primarily women executives who had left their executive position to go save elephants or whatever. And I thought, that's what she's doing, what she did. She had created a second act for her life after her cancer diagnosis. And that, combined with the health benefits, the known health benefits of volunteering, I came up with this idea, second acts. So I was volunteering for another cancer organization, and we were collecting women's essays about their second acts. And then one of the other volunteers had been selected for a stage performance about motherhood. And she said, we could totally do this for cancer survivors. We relocated back to Phoenix shortly after that. And shortly after we got here, that woman died of a return of her cancer. And I looked at my husband and said, this is it. I'm supposed to do this. This is why I went through cancer. And so I created a second act.
And tell us, it's a live storytelling event. What does that mean? Describe that to us, please.
Well, and it's a number of things. So the storytelling event, we audition women survivors of all cancers to read their 5-minute story of just a little bit about diagnosis and treatment. That was the traumatic part, but that's not the big deal. Yeah. About their cancer story, and then their aha moment, that because you get to the other side of cancer and you're desperately seeking its reason or to find a purpose for it in your life, because the human brain is just built that way. And so they all of a sudden realize, like I did, I know what I'm supposed to do now. And Patricia, it's everything from they have created organizations, they volunteer for organizations, they've written books, they give back in whatever way makes their heart sing. It does not have to be cancer related. Animals, children, prison reform, the elderly, the environment, you name it, we've heard the story. So the storytellers each year, we have a Phoenix performance and a Tucson performance. The cast is 8 women. They tell their stories. My executive producer, who stepped forward, she followed me into a parking garage, and she said, I have a 30-year theater history. I'd love to help you. And I was like, oh, done. So she coaches them professionally to have a stage presence like none other. We videotape it so that each individual woman's story can be seen on our YouTube channel. And the money that we raise, along with our books, which I just happen to have a copy of right
Please.
here.
Yes.
The books are the stories that have been told on our stages. Those allow us to make micro grants to women survivors who want to launch or grow their second acts. And we just, last year we were able to give 3 $1,000 grants. This year we gave 5 $1,000 grants. So then the other part, as I mentioned, we hold our workshops. They're day-long retreats. And then the 5th component of our little mission wheel, we hold what we call Girls' Night Out events, simply for the fun of getting together and networking with sister survivors. So we serve a little wine, we have some munchies, we have these gorgeous signature cupcakes. There's no program except when we award our grants, and then we just do the presentation. But the whole purpose is that women, even though still in treatment, can come and mingle with 30, 40, 50, 60 survivors having a blast. And to cap it all off, in Phoenix, we hold those things at Scottsdale Harley-Davidson, because where else would you go?
True.
Right next to the tattoo parlor. It's great. There's some really fun photos on our website.
There must be. There must be. I've seen some of them, but I haven't seen the ones you're talking about. I'll have to go back. As by the way, viewers, all of the resources that we're talking about, follow my normal protocol. After the episode, I will upload them. Look for above the video. If you're watching it live or replay, if someone has shared it with you, it would be below the video, and it will say resources mentioned in this episode. So make sure that's the websites and so forth. So the ladies who participate and they deliver their story, they've already gone through the process, and they are already in their second act with intentionality, serving others actively.
Exactly right.
Let's see. Are you thinking of going further out besides Tucson and Phoenix, or is that very, very homey right now?
So let me just go back. You started asking about the micro grants.
Yes.
So those might be to women who just want to grow their second acts, not just, but who want to grow their second acts. So they've already got something underway. Or it might be to women who are ready to launch theirs. And our advisory board carefully reads their grant applications. It's a very difficult process that I don't envy, but they do a great job of it. So with regard to growth, growth is an interesting thing. So just a quick story. I decided that I wanted to lose 5 pounds, and I went on the keto diet. And I was so excited because I lost 6 pounds. At the same time, I had so many things on my plate, including expanding to other states and figuring out how that would work, what that would look like. I went for a checkup, and my doctor said, wow, you've lost 6 pounds. How'd you do that? And I said, well, first tell me what my blood work looks like. And she said, I'm guessing you went on the keto diet because your cholesterol is through the roof. Oh. And I was so disappointed, and I was not getting the traction I wanted for second act, for expansion. And I go on these meditating, prayerful walks, and I climbed up a little hill, and I looked out over Phoenix and said, okay, Lord, I'm not sure where to go next. And all of a sudden, I heard too thin. The message is, we can make ourselves too thin. We can do ridiculous things to lose 6 pounds and mess up our cholesterol. we can spread ourselves so thinly that we aren't effective in any way, shape, or form. So I came back down off the mountain and thought, okay, so the way second act is going to expand is if a little group of women contact me and say, just give us the guide. We'll do this. You won't have to do anything. We want to do this in our city. And, you know, it's time consuming. It's not easy, and it's all volunteer. But that's going to be the best way, because being too thin is not good.
So true. That alleviates the responsibility and the burdens on you and the other leaders. And at the same time, it allows growth if the Lord wants it to grow.
If it's supposed to. That's right.
Perfect. And you can still be effective in the area that He's given you, which may expand and may not.
That's right. And I can certainly give them lots of guidance. But this isn't like Mary Kay, where I'm just going to go to another city and make up a bunch of faces, because in order for it to be effective, it needs to follow a certain protocol, because one part of our mission leads into another. And so you kind of have to do it all. And it's a concept, let's face it, you asked me this earlier, it's a concept that's really foreign to people. No one's ever thought of this before. Not that I'm all that. It wasn't all my idea anyway. It came from the Lord. But, you know, it's such an interesting way to look at it. And just one other quick little thing, if I may, it's not that there aren't other wonderful programs out there. There absolutely are. And one of the cool benefits of this is that every woman who participates, who has her own organization with which she's affiliated, she gets to promote her own organization, because that's her second act. So, and the work that we do, not that the medical community hasn't done a fabulous job of diagnosis and treatment and after cancer support, but they're so limited in their time, and hospital resources are being stretched in so many directions. So we are survivors guiding survivors on taking their life back after cancer.
And do the hospitals and the other organizations and ministries that serve cancer patients, have they fallen in love and advocate for a second act?
Absolutely. I just met with the executive director of the American Cancer Society here in the greater Phoenix metro area this morning. And I, we talked about a variety of different ways that we can get more involved with one another. And the same is true with all the organizations. I mean, survivorship is it's like a smorgasbord. For some people, standing on stage and telling their story, oh my God, they'd rather have a tooth pulled. Other people love that. But the ones who don't want to stand on stage, they're fabulous at just sitting one-on-one with someone and saying, you can do this. You can do this. So we lean on one another and learn from one another every single day.
I love it. Let me check Facebook and see if we have any comments or questions.
I'm really glad my children haven't put in comments or questions. I know they're both watching.
Spouses and children, but they were positive comments, so it was okay. Let's talk about your writing. Your writing compels me. I love World War II era stories. I love based on real life people. I love that component. The intrigue and the stakes are so high. And in your writing and in your pre-cancer life and in your cancer stage and in your after-cancer life, you are drawn to people of that ilk, and you encourage other people to step out and take a chance. The risks are high and they're worth it. Take them.
That's right. Because at any moment, you might no longer have the opportunity. So, why not? And the World War II books were very near and dear to my heart. My father was a World War II veteran. My grandfather was a World War I veteran. So I love the histories of the wars. I have a fabulous agent in New York who has been a great business partner, and we've done well together. And, he'll say to me, that's not a book idea. That's a magazine article. And then, well, maybe, and we go back and forth. And in my post-cancer world, World War II, I wasn't ready to go back to World War II. And the 2 books that I've written about World War II, and in fact, the second one, the rights have been purchased for a television station or a television series or a movie. So that's really exciting. And it'd be hard to top that. So, but I couldn't wrap my mind around anything. So I created Second Act, and life was great. And I thought Second Act was what was my second act, and that was it, and that was what the Lord's plan was for me. And then a little more than a year ago, I was visiting with a woman at a treatment center, an administrator at a treatment center, who asked me if I had met Susie Lay in Tucson. And I said, no. And she said, oh, you need to meet Susie Lay. So Susie and I set up lunch, and she was adorable, a little tiny petite thing. And we sat down, and she said to me, you're a no-kidding writer. I've looked you up. How do you find your books? And I said, well, I always tell people my books have found me. And since cancer, I've just not been able to wrap my mind around anything. And I said, so tell me about yourself. Patricia, I could hardly stand it until lunch was over and I could run outside and call my agent and say, I've found it. And this is what else God had planned for me.
Oh my.
So it's the history of President Nixon's war on cancer and the survivorship movement it created. And it's being told through Susie Lay's life. She was a combat nurse in Vietnam. She is a 4-time cancer survivor. She was one of the founding members of the Oncology Nursing Society, because she was a nurse. She is a founding member of the country's oldest and most venerable survivorship organization called the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. Before 1986, you could be fired if you had a cancer diagnosis. Your insurance could be revoked. You couldn't join the military. People thought they'd catch it from you. These are things no one knows about. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, we were called victims, and you couldn't be a survivor till you were a magical 5 years out. Mm-hmm. And that all changed in 1986. And Susie went from being a much loved and effective nurse to a real voice for survivorship. So this is wrapped, there's medical history, there's political intrigue into Nixon's war on cancer, there's amazing joy and astounding disappointment. So in addition to interviewing Susie for the book, I've interviewed a lot of her friends and associates, as well as people who were at the different moments in time, marching through the 60s, 70s, and into present day.
This is so your cup of tea, isn't it?
Oh, baby, are you kidding?
all the check marks.
I know, right? So I'm halfway done. Most of the research is completed. The manuscript should be completed and hopefully on its way to publication by June.
By June.
Mm-hmm.
And the title is?
Well, so here's what happens in the world of publication. The working title is The Accidental Handmaiden, because she was very shy and had no intention of speaking up about anything. And after this initial meeting, and so in telling the story, I keep building that in, and how shy she was. She got fired from a job because she was so emotional with patients. She had horrible PTSD. And she just had completely retired into her shell of survivorship. And she came back from this organizational meeting of the National Coalition of Cancer Survivorship ready to tell the world. So all of a sudden, she went from voiceless to very vocal.
And it sounds like she was on the front lines before the lines were drawn.
Every single time. every time. Even her experience in Vietnam, because I had, now I'm telling my age, I had high school classmates who, after graduation, ended up in Vietnam. And it just, for some reason, I was just not excited about researching that war. This forced me to do it. And the war was horrific, but it was interesting to go back in that time frame. I mean, I even was playing the Summer of Love songs in my office while I was writing.
Well, those are the best ones anyway.
I know, I felt like Forrest Gump all over again.
Oh boy. Mm-mm. When you were diagnosed, your husband told you that you were acting out the final scene in the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed. Let's close out with that. What does that mean to you? How did it play out? Do you agree with that now, looking back? Do you agree with that assessment?
So, it's interesting. I have always been one who prefers, despite the fact that I have done a lot of public speaking, I always felt I was doing it for something or for someone, for a cause I believed in or a topic I believed in. And I've always, other than that, preferred putting others out front. Mm-hmm. And I have horrible self-image. How much more time we go into a psychology lesson here, or psychology treatment. But I always have horrible self-image, and I never think of myself in the kind of light that I should, I guess. And he said to me, because I said, you know what, I've got this diagnosis. I'm going to keep writing publicly. And if what I write helps somebody, great. And little did I know that thousands of women have done that very successfully. Mm. And so he said those words. He said, you are going to have, because I had been speaking all over the country. I had lots of contacts in my newsletter list. And when I made this announcement, people I don't even remember meeting reached out to me either immediately or 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later. I've just been diagnosed. My mother was diagnosed. My sister was diagnosed. What should I do? How do I? And all the people that said, you've given us such hope that it isn't the end. It's not a death sentence. It's not. It's a life sentence. Cancer, in a good way, cancer is a sentence to go out and live your life. It's a directive. Do not waste a single second. And my husband was absolutely right. I was Jimmy Stewart and then some.
That gives me, everything that you just said just gives me goosebumps all over my body. You are a motivator, but you're doing it from the right reasons, from the right source. And it seems it's just has always been a natural part of your life. Christ created you, gave you the gifts and the ability to refine and develop those gifts to do this next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. And one of those next things was cancer. And now this is continuing writing, being an advocate for cancer in a different way. Second act. You still got a lot to do, don't you?
I do. I got a lot of ground to travel.
Oh, my goodness. Before we close, let me check Facebook one more time and see if we have any comments or questions, because we don't want to miss anybody.
And I apologize. The change in light in here is because it's a gorgeous day in Phoenix, and all of a sudden a cloud keeps passing over the sun. So we're just going to pretend that's the Holy Spirit saying, good job, ladies. There we go.
I love that. Yes, let's do that. Thank you so much for joining me. Your energy and your steadfastness and your rock solidness draw me.
Thank you so much. And thanks for providing such a wonderful platform for survivors and just storytellers in general. I appreciate it.
I appreciate those words. Viewers, we appreciate you being here, whether you're watching live or in replay. This has been episode number 144 of Marketers on a Mission with guest author Judy Pearson.